Hey, this is Ruthie, and I'm reading from Laura Florand's The Chocolate Touch. And this is my favorite scene. It's probably too long, so you'll just have to, well, it's not too long. It's exactly the right length, and I'm going to read it at exactly the right speed, so you can decide if you want to listen. Um, let's see, where are we going to start? A movement back in the kitchens drew her eyes. Dominique Richard had returned to find her. On the other side of the stairwell and through two walls of glass, their eyes met. He stood very still, very big. Something in his stance made her glance around for her escape routes, like prey, but there were none. If she left this slim, final corner of glass, she would be moving toward him, and he would be able to track her movements every step of the way. A hungry predator, he didn't wait for her to come to him. He prowled after her, closing her into that final corner of glass. Predator? Where did she get these ideas? She wasn't the yummy brunette. He was too big a predator to track someone her size as his prey. It would be like a panther tracking a cricket. Something a panther would only do if he was starving, and he could not possibly be starving. He stopped in front of her, blocking her into that little corner between glass and wall, his shoulders brushing either side of it. The void of the stairwell fell away behind her, just the other side of a sheet of glass. His body heated the whole space. She shivered in it, stroked all over before he even touched her. He was so close she could see even the faint pink breaking out along his smooth jaw, and that sent another wave of heat through her. Was his skin so soft then, or did he just shave too fast, impatient to burst on with his life? Do you ever stand up here and peek at the saal if there's someone famous? She asked. He glanced toward her usual table and back at her, an odd, wary expression on his face. There's often someone famous, and we're usually very busy. And you're famous yourself. Too famous to linger here, spying on clients, of course. He grinned, quite pleased he hadn't had to point his fame out. Are you? It sounded like a genuine question. Maybe he didn't know who she was after all. No, she said, honestly. Not for her accomplishments, anyway. He leaned in a little closer. No, that was her wishful thinking. She was definitely the world's most pathetic groupie. She wanted him to pick her up and press her back against that glass wall. She didn't want to remember how exposed the glass left them to the world. She tilted her head, her lips soft and openly begging. What stroked his skin all over? Your kitchens are so beautiful. I've never seen anything like them. For once, a compliment seemed to glance off him. She wasn't sure he even heard it. He closed one of those big hands around her wrist and rubbed his thumb over the bone there. You don't eat enough, he said softly. A shaft of anger shot through her. She wanted to yank her wrist away, to spite her own face, since she was the only one who would suffer for it. All she did was eat and go to the gym and wander around this city, which was another kind of exercise. She was devoting her whole existence to getting strong again. Damn it, she was doing the best she could. His gaze drifted over her set jaw. A frown flickered across his face. Then he rubbed his thumb over her wrist again, and she dissolved. She couldn't think past the feel of his thumb on that ultra-sensitive skin. Do you ever go out with strange men? He asked, low, and let them feed you mortal food? Her gaze shot back to his face. Heat bloomed all through her, taking over her sex and her nipples and the color of her face, that hated scarlet blush of hers flaming, a red flag to guarantee he noticed all her weaknesses. It's hard to stoop so low after yours. Again, the compliment seemed to glance off that absorbed focus of his, Okay, if that didn't please him, what about her could? Hero worship was pretty much the only arrow she had left in her quiver. His gaze roamed all over her face, seeing every bit of that blush. Thank God she'd pulled on a scarf so he couldn't see the way it swept over her throat and breasts, too. I've got to go, he murmured. I promised to do this stupid cooking show session. Oh. She would have pulled back in acceptance of the rejection, but she couldn't pull back. She was in a corner between glass, stone, and him. Are you doing anything tonight? He asked, very softly. The blush swept back through her so hard she felt as if she would burn up from the inside out, burning oh so particularly in all the parts of her body that she wanted to have pressed against him. She was probably supposed to go have dinner with her sister so Cade could worry about what she ate, but she could cancel. She wobbled her head uncertainly. Can I come pick you up? She nodded unsteadily, and every muscle of his body surged in response, and a very quiet rabbit looked up and realized she was cornered by a tiger and shivered in helpless delight at the fact that he wanted to eat her. Where are you staying? Staying, not where do you live? So impermanence was one of the base assumptions here. She dug into her purse for pen and paper. She turned toward the glass as a writing surface, his breath on the nape of her neck as she tried to make the pen work at that angle. Excitement kept licking over her skin, and yet at the same time, he smelled so deliciously of chocolate she could curl up in him like a comforter. She felt a deep, intense sense of coming home after too many years away. He leaned over her as if he couldn't help it, watching her write hungrily. His hand closed carefully around the paper when she gave it to him, not crushing it at all. He took a long, long breath, staring down at her. Then he turned his body like a heavy, reluctant gate that had not had its hinges oiled in some time. If she hadn't handed him her address as a password, would he have blocked her in that corner with his body forever until she yielded? Damn. Maybe she should have written more slowly, dropped her pen a few times, gotten their bodies tangled as they both reached for it. Any second, and she would just lean into him, layer her weight onto him, let him do with it what he would. Fighting resistance, as if trying to get her body into motion through thick melted chocolate, she forced herself to take a half step. It was either that, or look so desperate he would retract the invitation. 7:30 then? He checked as her body brushed his. She could have gotten past without brushing him, but why miss an opportunity? He might never even show up tonight, and then she would regret it. Would he stand her up? She glanced over her shoulder at him. He was staring at her with an intent, dazed look as if he was trying to see her through a fever. Maybe he was coming down with something that was making him act insane. I would like that, she said, and he grinned fast and hard. That grin warmed every part of her body, even the stubborn, achy one that usually refused to be warmed. It kept her warm, a golden, hopeful glow inside, as she forced herself to leave that source of heat, that scent of chocolate, and go out into Paris in the springtime.